Hello, hello. Welcome to Human Design Coffee Talk. Today we are going to be joined by James Alexander, and we're going to be talking about how we all subtly sabotage our deconditioning process. So come on in and join us. I just have to fix my little tripod here. Hello, hello. As you come in, if there's anything that you'd like to share about your design with us, we'd love to hear and see who's on with us today. And I'll probably say this again, but for those of you that are just joining us, and if you have a question, there is a little question box. Sometimes the comments get lost or we can't scroll, so the best way to send us a question is to hit the little question box. Hello, hello. All right. I see that James and Teresa are here. And let's see. I'm going to see. I just invited James. Somebody else just requested to join. I don't know who it is.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hey everybody. I said it earlier, if you're hopping on and you'd like to let us know where you're coming in from, anything about your design, we like to know who's on here. Also, there's a question box. If you put your question, if you have a question or something comes up for you, put it in the question box, not in the comments. Sometimes the comment section gets lost. So, hello, hello. Welcome to Instagram, James.
Woohoo!
Who gets to be the top half? Is that a like, did someone draw the short straw or how did that work?
No, I think just like whoever starts the live.
Got it.
Yeah. Because you can have up to 4 people.
She's in the queen chair.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have that gate though.
That's true.
45? Yeah.
We're all fighting for that.
I know.
I have the stuff, I just don't know what to do with it. So
We're some
you guys know what to do with it.
Yeah, funny story before we get started. Not funny, maybe funny. We met James in Santa Fe at the Human Design Conference, and Teresa and I went into one of his lectures that he was doing, and I kept feeling this literal pull inside of my body to ask him about 4521. And I was like, I don't even know this guy. I haven't seen his chart. I don't know. But it was like, it was coming from within me. And I was like, I'm just going to wait to respond. But it was like hardcore. And then it finished and I see his chart and he has 4521. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it split off like mine. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's why I wanted to talk to you so badly. Like I could feel some resonance there. And that was really cool to feel in aura.
Yeah, we're both recovering ego manifestors.
We could start a support group for that.
Many years of detox. Yeah.
No shit. I mean, that's a real thing. One time when we were in, I think it was rave cartography and we were introducing ourselves and Amy Lee was like, this is Brandy. She is a manifester and a generator. And she was like, and I was like, I know, I'm trying not to be.
I know. I've got a projected element too. So sometimes I was playing projector.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I remember one of my first readings, the analyst said, how are the 3 of you doing? You know, and it's very much like this very schizophrenic existence.
I can choke on my coffee. That was great. Oh, welcome. We got still more people hopping in.
Yay.
All right. I see we have a 1-3 channel emoting projector. There's a 5-2 self-projected projector. 1-3 emotional projector. Ego manifester. 21-45. Yeah.
There you go. Someone who's actually meant to operate that way.
It's so easy to do though.
Yeah.
Is it really easy to do until your thyroid gives out?
Right.
It comes with pain.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Where do you
Cool.
want to start? I see we do have a question.
Oh, already.
Maybe we'll get into, well, I'll come
Maybe,
back to that.
yeah, maybe take questions at the end,
Yeah.
and if they just all hang out in the question box, that's easy for us to just go through at the end.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious about, James, why you wanted to talk about this, because we always ask our guests like what topic they want to dive into, and this was his idea. So maybe you kind of want to tell us where that inspiration came from.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the simple answer is it's just alive for me right now.
Mm.
I think as a 5'1", I'm investigating. I have survival view, which just underscores that. I have a lot of first lines in my design. And, I'm always just reading between the lines with my clients, and just I'm not content to kind of hold on to the orthodoxy. If the orthodoxy is right because I've validated it, great. If it's not, then, too bad, I'm a heretic. So, I'm just at this point where I'm just looking into subtle stuff. And, there's just been a lot of topics around how the mind subtly interferes with and sabotages the deconditioning process. And I think a big piece of it, honestly, is people who they haven't yet grounded in themselves, and they are following the books and they're not looking inward. They're not really trusting their own direct experience, which is what you always have to do. Even if your interpretation of that turns out to be wrong, you have to start with where you're at, right? You have to be true to that. You have to work through that. And so, I've just, really it's been a lot of what I've been sharing on Instagram over the past few weeks. All these different ways that we get in our own way. So.
Yeah. And timely, may we add, about this chat, because the past couple of weeks, Teresa and I have been like plunged into the depths of really understanding that passenger consciousness and like all the ways we were sabotaged. I mean, like, it was almost like, are we really going to have a coffee talk about this? Because this is wild, the timing.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild.
It's the way it works. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely I've been kind of like digging deep into some of the more advanced texts that Ra has out, and, where he talks about passenger consciousness a little bit more. And I am kind of starting to understand that, like, you have to kind of be, like, kind of what you're talking about. You have to be in a certain space to be able to even receive that information. Because, if I would have even glanced at that kind of stuff my first year or even year and a half, and I'm going into like 4 years now, but of knowing about human design, not actively living it. Let me preface that. But it's almost like you have to be in that space where you are trusting your body to even be able to integrate what passenger consciousness really means. Like, if I were to say that to somebody in the first session, they'd be like, what the fuck? And I even had an experience yesterday, and I am curious to know kind of your perspective on this, because it's sometimes I think that my mind is running the show, right? I'm like, oh, my mind did that. But then it's almost like I have this deeper understanding of my body doing it and my mind taking the credit for it. And so yesterday, for example, I was actually having like a very apathetic day. I was kind of just like laying on the couch. I didn't really have anything to respond to. And I'm like, what am I doing? And I picked up my phone, and I think I was scrolling and saw somebody doing a workout, and my mind pipes in and goes, working out makes you feel better. Every time you work out, you get energy, you feel better, you should do it. But I could actually feel my body like starting to ready itself, like getting ready to do a workout. It was almost my body was getting this feeling of responding, like, yep, this is what we got to do. But my mind jumped in and like tried to take credit for it. Like trying to convince me to do it. You know what I'm saying? Right. And so I think it can be confusing for people who are hearing about passenger consciousness, because you're kind of still in that space where you don't really understand the role of the mind, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think within our subjective awareness, there's always the illusion of choice, And so what I've heard some teachers say is that if you're making a choice, if you think you're making a choice, then you're in the wrong space. And I understand the point. Although I would say within the confines of our subjective awareness, there's always the illusion of choice. So sometimes this experiment looks like you're actually choosing to get out of your own way, right? And sometimes, of course, you notice yourself just doing something,
Yeah.
you know. But I think, you know, Ra talks about mechanics being hidden. You know, the mind sees the effects of the mechanics, right? It sees the effect of our unconscious. And so I think the illusion is there, and you just have to slowly train yourself over time to realize that, you know, as you observe mechanics, it's one of the reasons why I love going deep with the knowledge is that, yeah, of course, it comes back to the simple. It comes back to strategy and authority, without a doubt. However, there is a lot of practical benefit, and I'm always thinking about practical benefit because I'm a 5-1. There's a lot of practical benefit to getting in the weeds with the knowledge. If, you know, you're like me and you're really served by catching the mechanics throughout the day.
Yes.
You know, especially living with kids, let me tell you, you know. So it's great to always have, and I actually just put this out there recently, a mechanic is an antidote to a judgment. You know, the mind is so conditioned to evaluate, to judge, to think it's got to do something with its judgments. And every time I see a mechanic, I just kind of breathe deeper, I relax, I sink into the present moment, I see it as impersonal, and I let it go.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. And I love that talking about the choice. You know, I love talking about the subject of choice in human design because that can be like that can be touchy for people.
Yeah.
Alok said, what did he say? He said something like that really like stuck with me about no choice. If you think you have a choice, I can't remember, but it was so good. It was like, if you think you have a choice, it's automatically incorrect. Something I can't remember, but
like if you have the choice, you'll always choose what you're not.
Yeah.
See, that's
implying that it's like too easy to be yourself, even though it's not. But you know, it's.
See, that's the very statement that I'm not sure I 100% agree with, and I get his point. But my reality is that it can feel like there's a choice from my mind's perspective, and there can be this sense, as illusory as it might be, that I am choosing the body versus choosing the mind, right? So, yeah, it's subtle territory. Definitely don't start with no choice.
Right.
That isn't the first thing I say in a foundation reading.
Yeah.
But ironically, though, I'll tell you that actually my background was more familiar with passenger consciousness before design. You know, I was doing a lot of stuff like that in terms of just my awareness path, in non-dual traditions, and having these, you know, moments of perfection that I was experiencing. And so, you know, I didn't call it passenger consciousness at the time. I just called it the witness. And it's not as glamorous or as exalted as people make it out to be. You know, it can be very mundane. It's just your capacity just to be with whatever is arising, right? Without getting snagged in it. And so I had a lot of experience with that before human design. So when he was talking about passenger consciousness, I totally got it. And I thought it was interesting that people were so, they're clinging to their designs, like defensively. Like, this is me, you know? And I think it totally makes sense because we've all been through trauma. Trauma is something that we're all, the three of us, are aware of and sensitive to. And I think that when you haven't been allowed to, so to speak, or you haven't known how to be yourself, when you finally find your turf, you want to defend that turf. Totally makes sense. It's a transitional period. And so you get a lot of defensiveness. You know, I've spent more time on Facebook than Instagram. So you get a lot of defensiveness about, hey, that's not me, and screw you, you know. You know, it becomes a battle, you know. And I think that what's interesting is that although we have a design, we are not actually our design.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, we're the passenger, right? You know, we're awareness, you know, and so it's it's about experiencing yourself in an impersonal way as well. You know, we didn't choose any of this. You know, there's nothing to defend. There's nothing good or bad about any of this. There's nothing to, you know, to grab onto as a source of pride or to push away as a source of shame. It just is what it is. And, you know, I think when you really start to see that even you are impersonal in your design, then that's when a lot of space starts to open up.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like what I pictured in my mind was standing on a curb and waiting for a car to pick you up. And you're just going to hop in any car that comes by. And I'm not going to get super defensive about the taxi that I'm getting in or the car that I'm riding in because I just jumped in. You know?
Yeah, for sure. That's totally.
I really love how you describe that. I could really feel that. I've been massively like integrating exactly that the past like week and a half, and it's just like it's just who I am. It's just what it is, you know. And there's no choice of the design. It's just letting it play out and not being attached to what happens when you're just letting that play out. I don't know. It's woo.
And the more you can let yourself go, the more you can not pick at yourself, the more you can just be with yourself, the more space you're giving to other people as well, right?
Oh, the space.
So the intrapersonal is a, you know, it informs the interpersonal. So
absolutely. Ooh,
so is that one of the ways that you feel that the mind sabotages the deconditioning process is just clinging too tightly onto the design?
it is. You know, I think that defensiveness is the hallmark of the not self. And I'm not here to tell you that I'm above and beyond it and I, you know, exist on some, you know, cloud nine of nirvana. But, you know, there's more and more space, you know, through the deconditioning process. And look, I think that sometimes you can be benefited even if you're not in the passenger, if you just remember mentally that it's impersonal because you did know that. You have learned that, you have had that legitimate insight, and then you just draw upon it. You're like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm kind of in this right now, but I do remember that I had this real experience of how impersonal I am and life is.
Oof. Yeah, really just the no control of all of it, you know?
Yeah.
Which kind of brings me to my next pondering. So what do you think about the term like making a wrong decision? Because if we really are just the passenger watching this movie play out, is it possible to make a wrong decision?
I don't think so. No. I think there are choices that are aligned with our purpose. And I think there are choices which are the perfect experience to bump us back to the right road. And so it's all good. I mean, I can't believe, you know, the experience that I've had, and at the time thinking I was so lost and, you know, just being engulfed in the pain of those, but kind of where I've come. And I'm like, you know, I wouldn't be who I was if I didn't have those experiences. I had to go through them. I mean, look, the human evolutionary way, you know, the 41-30 up to the 36-35, that's all about learning the hard way. You know, that's what humans do, is they learn through crisis, you know. That's what that teaches us. We do, you know. So
can everybody just take a big deep breath? You can't make a wrong decision. I mean, that's the piece that I've been integrating the last couple of weeks, is because my mind, right, it wants to beat me up about, oh, you shouldn't have done that. You should have done this instead. And it's so exhausting. That inner critic voice is so exhausting when you believe it, when you listen to it, right? And that's another thing, is I'm also acutely aware that I can't even control my thoughts at this point. Like, I can be aware of them and I can kind of redirect my thoughts at times. Or just watch them and be like, oh, haha, that's funny. But I don't even have control over my mind. I don't have control over the thoughts that are passing through my mind. And I'm not going to think of myself as a bad person for thinking something, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most simple proof points of no choice is just realizing that your awareness shows up when it shows up. You know, you can learn something 100 times, you can still forget it. You don't choose your capacity for your awareness just to arise. Right. That's no choice.
Yeah, I had a situation this week where I've been kind of mulling over something for 6 months about like restructuring something massive. And Sacral knew like right away. And I was like going through this deconditioning of my solar plexus, my undefined solar plexus. I didn't recognize how much I was avoiding confrontation by not actually acting. And I was just like, I knew what I was supposed to do. And so I acted on it. It was like, I felt like I literally had no choice but to, right at that moment, 2 days ago, just boom, it's going to happen. And the space that it opened up, it's been incredible. I told Teresa this morning, I went to bed at like 8:45 last night and slept for like 11 hours. After I was just like, my body was just like, but it took a while. Like I knew sacral, yes, to making these changes, but it's not like I didn't have the capacity in my body to like move forward with that. And that can show up in a lot of ways. How do you see that? How have you seen that in your life or with your clients, James?
You mean just this kind of post-realization kind of after effect? This kind of...
Yeah.
Well, actually, just recently I did with a client who had a PHS reading, and it was hard for her to kind of grok the fact that she was an indirect eater, you know? So really it's about eating after sun goes down or throughout the day, lightly, you know, without the presence of UV light. And look, it's a tough one. It's a tough pill to swallow. I get it. But, you know, we talked through it, and then bells went off, and it was either the next day or the day after. She thought she might have COVID or the flu, and it was this big, you know, but she had enough awareness. She was like, this is really coincidental. Like, you know, I just had all these realizations. She shared human design for the first time with her partner, her boyfriend, and he was a bit like, whoa, why have you been holding this from me, you know, back from me? And the whole thing. And so, you know, I actually don't know. I know that she's fine now. I don't know what the diagnosis was, but it kind of seems like it was this big detox. So yeah, I've totally been there. I mean, I remember way back in the day before human design being on different spiritual retreats and getting sick like afterward. And yeah.
Or before, or like the purge before, which is what was ironic about us having this chat. And I was like, this happened to me when I was like deep in spirituality, like before I would like go into a new course or learn something new, it would like all come up in my face. And so I was like, that's what's happening with this talk. Like, why am I diving into the plunges of everything that we're going to talk to James about?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. The day that I started integrating passenger consciousness and actually having that awareness, I was so sick. Like the coming days after, I kept thinking I had food poisoning. I was like sick to my stomach. I was very lethargic and tired. It was like my body needed to process everything that was finally landing, you know? And I think it's really just it's not that my mind integrated it, right? It's my mind and my body kind of like coming to peace with that. And it's almost my mind witnessing my body actually integrating that into the cells, which is a freaking bizarre experience.
Right.
Because it's a cellular transformation. I think we forget, we get so into like the words and the fluff. And I mean, even in source material, it can be like fluffy a little bit, but it changes you at a cellular level.
It's called raw fluffy.
5-1 ego.
I mean, it's funny. I was reading this passage the other day, and where he was talking about passenger consciousness, and he was like, you know, it's pretty funny to me. Like, this is all a silly game, essentially. And he's like, I talk about strategy and authority. Do you think you have the choice whether you're sitting in front of me getting a reading? Like, you don't have a choice. And it's just this paradox, you know, and that can be really hard for the mind to wrestle with. The body knows what it's doing, but that can be really hard for the mind.
Let me put on my raw hat here.
Oh, yes.
I got mine too. I love that hat.
Well, yours says 5-1 manifester. You have like the OG raw hat. Generator. See, here I am.
Just generator.
Generator. Yeah, you're a generator.
You're only feeling one of his splits. It's just one of his personalities.
Yeah. Do you want to dive into the topic of spirituality in the email that you wrote? I can't remember what it was verbatim.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot in what you just said. I mean, look, I think one thing also about, you know, health stuff, I mean, sometimes we get sick to get embodied, right? It's coming here. And I think one of the unique value proposition of human design is that you can be the passenger in the body, right? So it's not a disassociation. So it isn't a spiritual bypass. And that's a lot of what I've seen. You know, I've met a lot of kind of celebrity gurus and just found that either they weren't that embodied or they really hadn't dealt with their shadow. You know, they were blasted, right? Like they had this mystical awakening, and yet it hadn't really integrated. And so I think human design is a great integration tool. So it's sort of the best of both worlds. But
yeah, it's almost like you can just feel when somebody's kind of disconnected from their form. And it's just swimming in God knows what, which is also fine because that's part of their experience. That's part of their ride. And we're just witnessing them have that experience. But I forget who said this one time. It was one of my spiritual mentors back in the day. They were like, don't trust a spiritual teacher that isn't connected to their body, basically, because we're here to have the human experience. And I think that's what was so refreshing for me about human design was I kind of came from that spiritual world, and I had great mentors. I've actually never had a spiritual mentor that I feel was disconnected from their body. Most of my teachers taught embodiment, and I feel very fortunate. And that's probably why I was ready for design when it came to me. It was like I was getting prepped for that. Also, my mom's taken me to Zen meditation ever since I was like 4 years old. So, and that, you know, that is non-duality or duality is that watching your thoughts. And so I was introduced to that at a very, very young age. And every time I talk to my mom about human design, she's like, yeah, that's basically Zen practice, you know, and with some tweaks, of course, but just the act of watching your thoughts and not grabbing onto them and the impersonal component of all of it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's funny. I for whatever reason, was responding to watch a YouTube video by a former spiritual mentor. I'm not going to name names, but what I was really struck by was how profoundly embodied he really was. I haven't been in contact with him for many years, but he just struck me as more embodied than most people I know in the design experiment. And I thought, wow, so interesting. And yet he doesn't know about design. And so, you know, he's got stories, you know, when you don't know mechanics, you have a lot of stories about how things could be and should be. And it was just a paradox of like, on one hand, this guy, I could just feel how grounded he was, how present he was. And on the other hand, just trapped in some of the seven-centered spiritual trip, you know? So it's a weird place to be.
What I've noticed with design more recently, and I mean, this has always been going on, but yesterday I just had this really big awareness of it, of like, I was a Vedic meditator for 7 years, 8 years, you know, deep in the, you know, the thoughts, and I have completely open head and, you know, a lot of other stuff, but I had to like actively try to like get rid of that, like do things to get rid of it. And I'm realizing more and more, I don't even have I don't have that mental weirdness anymore, like spinning thoughts or anything like that. Yesterday, a situation came up and was presented to me, and I was like, it was my husband talking to me about something, and I was like, I actually don't even think about that stuff until I have, like, I'm so in a place that if I don't have anything to respond to, I'm just doing what I like to do and then responding. And I don't have that in-between chatter that I worked so hard to get rid of by a daily practice of meditating 20 minutes twice a day, on top of like just constantly having to do stuff to feel good. I get to just move through the world. I'm also way more embodied now. A lot of that stuff I felt like was kind of taking me out of my body, or I could easily bypass getting in my body, you know, trauma. We bonded over trauma in Santa Fe. That's something that's near and dear to all of us, because human design is such an embodied experiment, and it's not safe for everybody. Not everybody feels safe in their body.
Right, totally.
If we do an overview or foundation reading with somebody, and it's not safe for them to get in their body, they're not going to be able to hear or feel their authority.
Totally. Yeah. That's so true. I see that all the time. Yeah. You you guys are, you know, that's one of the things we just clicked on right away, was that we're all trauma sensitive. And I think it's a real blind spot in the community. And, you know, I'm educating myself and working more with trauma, because I can see that sometimes it's a prerequisite just to entering the experiment. You know, people are frozen out from their body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tristan and I were talking about that this week, how we ramble so much that I can't exactly remember it verbatim.
Externalizing.
We were just like, am I waiting to respond, or am I disassociating?
Yeah, right.
That's
the whole waiting and transference trip.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You want to you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So in my observation, I see motivations as kind of falling in two categories. And I guess the way that I've been talking about it is sort of, there's motivations that are more involved and less involved. Okay. First color, fear, more involved. You know, you're being motivated to get down to the bottom of things and quell that fear. Second color, hope, less involved. It's the intelligence to know what will change without your intervention. Third color, desire. You know, you're going to find yourself having agendas. You're going to get locked in. You're on that developmental journey, you know, toward leadership and so on. Very involved. Fourth color, as all fourth colors, can go either way. It could be more involved in meeting needs or less involved. Fifth color, guilt. This is me, definitely more involved. I'm here to fix things. And then sixth color, innocence, doing what you love, not worrying about where it gets you. But it can also be a big checkout and transference, right? So what I see here is that when you are a more active motivation, as, let's see, Teresa is with desire, or I am with guilt, we can go to a more dissociative place. She goes to innocence. That's the ultimate dissociative place. Any sixth color and sixth line has this tendency to dissociate, to escape, to go up in the head, get out of the body. So what I find with people who have guilt or with desire is that they can really do a big checkout. And often they're waiting from the checkout. They're waiting from transference. Now, what does that mean? You might say, well, waiting's doing nothing. So is that really a problem? Well, it's not doing nothing. If you're doing something, identify with those thoughts, you're not really present with your body. You're not really hearing the inner authority. And you're not surrendering to how you are moved. Mm-hmm. Right? And so it's very important, okay, for a lot of designs, depends on who you are. Sometimes the challenge is you're over-involved. Sometimes the challenge is you're under-involved. You're actually getting that knock on the inside to stand up and to get involved and do something, but you're not hearing it because you're really identified with the transfer. Mm-hmm. Even on the surface of the chart, this is a big lesson for open solar plexus. So when you combine open solar plexus plus like a desire transferring to innocence, you've really got this, you know, potential trap of checking out. Well, I'm going to avoid confrontation and truth and just check out and do nothing right now. When you're made, you know, for maybe having that uncomfortable conversation, pursuing that goal, but not from here, of course, but to find yourself locking in and pursuing those goals. Does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense to me, just with even the example that I used earlier, where I was kind of checked out yesterday. At the same time, I was very aware of that happening. So I think that's the difference. Once you're aware of your transference, it's not like we can control going into transference, right?
Right.
Still no choice, but I had this awareness of it. And I wasn't identifying with that part of me. And then I could be present with my body to feel my body responding to a workout, which also makes sense. I have channel of struggle, and I'm like, if I don't have some sort of challenge, you know, throughout my daily life, then I get in this weird space, and there's this release that happens when I'm able to overcome a challenge, whatever. And it's also kind of going towards a goal in a way, but it's this place of doing it because it feels good. It feels like my body is responding to it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think different types of wounding manifest differently, right? And so what I dealt with personally, which is why I'm speaking about this, is there was a leg of my journey where I felt off. I knew something wasn't right, and I didn't have the awareness of what was happening. And you know, I have the 2946, which is very much about just being present with, you know, what's happening, you know, with whatever I've responded to. So I'm in my experiment. It was after a while I reflected back and I was like, I was checked out. I was in hope or hopelessness. And from that place of hope and hopelessness, I wasn't really tuning in. I wasn't really, you know, feeling what was going on within me, which brings up the point that waiting isn't one thing. It isn't a one-dimensional thing. It's very multidimensional. There's different ways to wait. You can wait in a dead and dull way where you are listening to your monkey mind, or you can wait in this way where you're really tuned in to the vibration of your body, to the energies that are moving in your body. And you can hear that inner authority. And as we've been saying, there's all kinds of different things that can kind of block hearing that.
Yeah. I think this is interesting what Sammy's saying. I can lessen suffering when I'm in transference by not wishing things were other than they are. But going after goals is a trap that can't move my body. What do you think about that?
Going after goals is a trap. Well, I don't know. Is Sammy innocence or desire? I don't remember.
Sammy is need motivation, I believe.
Okay. So I need to hear it. I need to hear it one more time.
Basically, she was saying that she can lessen suffering by not trying to change the situation, or
Right.
I can't scroll up now. Like, I don't want to butcher it, but that's what it felt like.
I can read it. It says,
Okay.
I lessen suffering when I'm in transference by not wishing things were other than they are.
Yeah.
But going after my goals is a trap that I can't move my body.
Right. I think if I remember correctly, Sammy's a personal view and I don't remember, but yes, but of course, like you have to lean into wherever you're at. You have to be present with wherever you're at. And, you know, I think that be this as it may, with the fact that awareness is going to show up when it does, we do develop, but we don't develop from a mental agenda, no matter how, but we develop by engaging with ourselves, by being present with ourselves. You know, awareness is alchemical, right? And so if you look at how Ra is talking, he is talking as if there's a choice. That's the paradox. But there's no spiritual teacher that has ever transcended this paradox, because all languages in the world, other than some indigenous languages, which I actually watched an interesting documentary on this, all languages of the world sort of create this subject that is affecting an object. It's language, though. You have to kind of hear between the lines. You have to feel the frequency, and you see with what it opens up in you or not, right? And so, you know, I don't worry about the implications of sounding as if there's a choice, because that's just unavoidable, you know, and see how it moves you or not.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think it also just highlights how different we all are.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and even when we get into variables, we really see how we even view the world differently, how we have entirely different perspectives. We all wear different glasses. We see the world through a different lens. There's leftness and rightness and all of that. So, yeah, it's really fascinating.
Yeah.
And having awareness of these things. Oh, go ahead, James.
I was just going to say, someone just mentioned you don't get to choose which way you wait. You don't, but noticing how you are waiting can shift things. I think that's the important piece here, is when you do something, you're no longer in it and identified with it, you're objective to it. It's just noticing. The essence of this experiment is really just watching.
Yeah.
You're not even really making choices, you're watching your choices. So the more that you see, the more that you have that recognition, the more you slowly come into alignment.
Yes. One thing so with the awareness and the watching piece, what was really helpful for me was I had a session with you. It was like a not self session. So James does these and they're incredible. So you have awareness of who you are at such a degree. And we can look at our own charts, but I think there's something like, I couldn't look at I also don't have the same education as James. He's way more into his experiment than I am by years. But to have somebody else as outer authority being like, here's, you know, to have the awareness of this, it really like checked me right there. there was a definite shift after that, because then I just have awareness and I can be like, oh,
Yeah.
that's happening. Oh, you know,
Well,
not doing anything to fix anything. That actually goes against my chart completely. But
you know, you were ready to develop that awareness. Like if I would have done not self-reading with James a year ago, I would have been like eyes glazed over. I probably would have done nothing with that. Well, it's not like I'm doing anything with the information. It's like I'm trying to rephrase this to convey that concept of no choice, but it's almost like we don't have control when we're ready for that awareness, when that awareness is going to click, right? But your body was there because you were ready for it, you know?
Yeah. It was a pull, like you feel it. It's, you know.
Yeah.
And I think these are the things that we talk about all the time. Like, my body did this, my body did that. But when people first enter design, there's not an awareness of that because they're so used to thinking this is doing everything when it's not.
Yeah. And the converse isn't true. Just because your body did it doesn't mean it's correct.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just because your body did it doesn't mean it's correct, doesn't mean you should analyze that either. But there is the recognition sometimes of, oh, I was just blind. You know, I just was kind of in a mode, you know, carrying out old not self habits, you know. So, you know, we're always looking for kind of an easy answer. Oh, my body did it. Guess it was correct. Oh, no choice. Therefore, you know, don't tell me I could be any different. I mean, you don't know how you could be, but you have to kind of engage with yourself, you know, with presence, with awareness to kind of see how things shift. So it's all a paradox.
Yeah. And I mean, that definitely highlights what we were talking about earlier about it's impossible to make a wrong decision because if we're following our body, you know, watching our body, whatever you want to call it, your body is still going to take you into uncomfortable situations sometimes. I saw that somebody said this one time. It was just some random person on Instagram, but they were saying, you know, I've been following my authority and it's been making my life worse. And they were pissed. They were almost saying like human design might be a lie. This is bullshit. And I'm like, wow, look at your mind just really struggling with the discomfort of life. And that's something that and I think that's why I always say all the time, human design isn't sexy inherently. And there's people that try to make it sexy and try to dress it up in lingerie, it feels like, you know, and try to sell it in that way. But it's not going to take away the process of or the experience of discomfort. It's just not. We're human. We're in this uncomfortable experience. And that's just how it's going to be. It just helps you to have that awareness while you're in it.
Totally. I mean, well, to me, nothing takes away discomfort or mitigates discomfort as seeing things impersonally. You know? But you're right. I mean, you know, one of the unpleasant traps of seven-centered spirituality is that disassociation. And, you know, some of those teachers are kind of, you know, they're so checked out, they're not feeling their pain or they're not really helping their students. You know, it's just because, you know, life is like a movie doesn't mean that pain isn't real and life isn't hard and all the rest of it. You know, we need to be in that, you know, but in that with awareness. Yeah.
It's like, I had this, well, there's something called thought work, you know, and it can be helpful, depends on the situation, right? But there's also this component I see of it where it's like thinking your way out of pain, you know, trying to think your way out of being fully in the experience and invalidating what feelings you're having, you know, like, oh, you have a gun to your head. You can think your way out of that experience. Literally, I've heard this teacher say that. Like, well, it's still a beautiful day out, you know, and I think that's what we mean by dissociation. It's like, no, if you have a gun to your head, that is a terrifying experience. And there's going to be a lot of thoughts around that. And maybe your body is okay. But I feel like I've been in terrifying experiences and my body has a stress reaction because that's what our body's designed to do at the same time. It's not my thoughts giving my body a stress reaction.
Oh, just transcend it. Just transcend it.
Just transcend the gun to your head.
Do all these things, transcend being in the body. But why do we have a body if we're trying to transcend it all the time?
Yeah. I mean, it's the fuckery of positive psychology, you know?
Absolutely.
It's a dangerous trap. It's one of those things that just seems so good, you know? Positive. That's a good word, you know? I mean, I remember having a client who was struggling with, this is a common thing, you know, the guilt motivation, you know, it's like, what, guilt? You know, and I'm like, but it doesn't have to be a heavy thing. You know, I catch myself, you know, just fixing things, you know.
Yeah.
Example that comes up, you know, my girlfriend with her kids, you know, they're sick or whatever. I just became like Dr. James. I just kind of jump in and I just start doing my thing as an open spleen will, you know.
Yeah.
And
taking the action steps.
that's it, you know, and it doesn't have to be a heavy trip. And hope, you know, I think that language really, I saw Jen actually just say the prejudice of words, you know. And one of the things that keeps people from human design or from really going deeper in their experiment is language. And that, raw, the voice, however you want to kind of say this, but whatever he kind of put forth, you know, through him, it was not sunshine and rainbows, you know, it wasn't Richard Rudd, and thank God. And so you kind of beyond things, you know, like I have friends that have, I'm trying to think if it's 18-2 that might be, I can't remember if that one's perversion or that, no, it's terminal disease, 8-18-2. But, you know, when you really unpack it, you know, terminal disease, well, you're in the spleen, okay? So it's all about health and wellness, whether we're talking about individually or collectively or tribally. So this is a collective, you know, gate and part of a collective channel. And the point is that it's about having the wisdom to know when to let go. Hey, this thing, this business venture, let's say, or this book that I'm writing, or this friendship, it's done. Let go, move on. You know, so you just have to sit with it a little bit. And I actually like that it requires a little bit of an artfulness, you know, a little bit of contemplation to kind of yield those insights. It's not obvious always, you know, and that's okay.
Well, and language can deter people too, because Laura just says terminal disease is my conscious son. That doesn't sound awesome. You know, if somebody's just digging into design and they're like, oh, my personality son, terminal disease, that, you know, that could like freak people out and like stray them away. But it's not, the words just carry a frequency, but like you just explained, it's not like, it's not going to mean terminal disease.
There's another line, I think that it might be like the Grinch or something like that. It might be 27, 3, I can't remember. But yeah, there's, you know, what I always do in readings is I unpack that for people and I make sure that they aren't deterred to kind of move forward by the language. And, you know, I just think it's a shame because there's just so much baggage that we kind of carry with us about what words mean. And, oh, well, hope is good. That's better than being guilty, you know, and all these kind of things. And, you know, at the end of the day, all these keynotes are just signposts back into your life, right? So you actually have to explore them and kind of match, okay, I have guilt motivation. Well, if that's real, then it's real somewhere in here. What does it feel like in here when I'm coming from guilt motivation? And I know where that is, and it is very much where I'm touching right now. I feel it in my chest. Hope, on the other hand, is a checkout. Like I said before, when these more involved motivations move to a less involved motivation, I don't feel anything because I'm not in here. I'm up in here. So when I'm feeling something in here, I know that, okay, I'm in touch, you know, and then that guilt, I feel that sitting in my chest. So it's always about bringing the keynotes back to a somatic indicator. There's some energy signature in your body that corresponds to the keynotes.
Yeah.
Yeah, hope for me is I can tell when I'm in guilt transference. It's very different. It's a very different feeling in my body. And hope for me, going back to like speaking positively and all of that, like I'm wildly optimistic.
You're also a 6 line.
I'm also a 6 line. But, you know, it's just like this. And then, so I resonated with a lot of that, like positivity stuff. And I was like, this is like, this makes me feel good. But then I was like, oh no, that can be toxic for like, there's not a blanket way of being. That's why I enjoy human design, because everybody's so unique. And then you can see what's for you. You know how you operate. I mean, I just fucking love it.
Well, we do need that balance, you know, and that's why we have all of those, or what we can speculate. That's why we have all of the different motivations, is we do need the people that are optimistic and like, yeah, like life doesn't totally suck, you guys.
Yeah, if
You know,
if I'm not in hope, there might be no hope.
we need
Right.
a world with some hope, but not everybody needs to be sitting in that, you know?
Yeah, no, it's I know it's just crazy all the homogenized concepts out there, right? And just without human design, I don't see how I ever would have worked through it. You know, but the other thing is that all these motivations, there's like this marriage of opposites, right? Like you can see that guilt, this motivation to fix things, it's conjoined with hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it isn't supposed to lead with hope. But hope is kind of in the background, you know? It's not in my awareness. It isn't what I'm leading with, but there's the implication there that if I'm going to get involved and fix something, that there must be some hope that that thing could be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
There is a question about motivation on here that I want to pop up on the screen real quick. Would love to hear about need, motivation, and possibility view. So everybody has a motivation and a view, and there's so many different combinations of it. Do you want to speak on need motivation at all?
Yeah, well, look, it's just about what is needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're just motivated to either serve your own needs or other people in terms of what's really needed. One of my good friends and actually partner in crime, Denise, has this need motivation, and we were exploring doing something together. And until she saw the need, she wasn't going to get involved. You know, it's like, wait a minute, are we doing it because we're trying to survive and this is like this fear-based thing? That doesn't feel right. But as soon as she saw that there was like this gap, like, oh yeah, people need this, like this doesn't exist, then, you know, she had the energy to get involved with it. But need, motivation, and possibility view. So, you know, the real trap there is in probable fears, you know, getting lost in like, oh my God, I'm so sure that I need to know this or that this is going to happen, you know, this adverse thing. But it's just this really buying into your fears as if they're dead certain, realistic, and probable.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing to kind of be present to. But, you know, the need and the possibility, in my mind, depending on what else is going on in your design, that could be a hell of an entrepreneur, okay? Because you're seeing what's missing, what's needed, and you're also in touch with the possibilities, right?
Yeah.
So you're seeing these remote possibilities that no one else is seeing to fulfill a need.
Yeah. Where in the chart do you learn motivation? Those are on the more advanced charts.
Yeah.
So that's more
Substructure.
yes.
Yeah.
Deeper.
Right side, personality side.
It's deeper into Tanika just had her first overview reading with me. So that's definitely something we can cover. All right, let me see if we have any more questions here. And go ahead, and if you have any questions, you can drop them in the question box. And next question is from Carla. What do you think of the term autopilot as most people experience this? How does it differ through the HD lens?
I'm not entirely sure, so I'll start answering the question, and Carla, let me know if I've caught it. But I think that just operating on autopilot, as I said a moment ago, you know, the body just does something. That doesn't mean it was correct. In fact, what I really emphasize with people, there's a difference between, let me take a step back. I can think of mundane example. You know, we had this really bad storm here a few months ago, and there was all these branches and bramble in my yard. And I look outside and I'm like, well, this looks like shit. I need to take care of this. But I didn't have the energy for it. So one day, maybe a month later, you know, I was cleaning out my car, and all of a sudden I looked over and I just started doing it. I just started cleaning up my yard. So that's one example where it was like totally fine. It was totally correct. But we have to be aware that the body can also just be expressing conditioning, right? Because the body side does transfer. One of the things I'll tell you is the most proven aspects of design, and it's crazy to me that some people deny this, but PHS transfers, right? So when I meet people, I see them, you know, hanging out in the opposite environments usually, and the opposite PHS. Point being, the body gets distorted. So autopilot is a dangerous place to be. What I like to see, what I'm trying to, help my clients with is really living in their body with present awareness, and you're actively watching your decision get made. There's a big difference between being present, decision being made in your body, and just kind of being like, oh, my body did this. Because that, oh, my body did this moment can also just be acting out addiction or any number of other things. I'd be curious if that answered your question, Carla.
Yeah, she said that's what I was getting at. Thank you.
Cool.
Yes. And then trauma, because we could be in like a trauma response and we'll be like, my body's just doing it. And it could be a complete trauma response, or that my body doesn't want to do anything. And that could be trauma response, freeze instead of waiting.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Awesome question, Carla. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question.
All right. There was a question up here. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Emily says that was the best description of motivation in such a short statement when you were talking about need. Yep. Jenny says, with hope, I enjoy the aspect that is discerning to know what to invest in. It feels realistic and positive at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to touch on transferred environment or transferred determination?
Yeah, sure. So transferred determination. So basically, through all the conditioning that we've identified with through our openness, until we've really, gone through a significant deconditioning period with strategy and authority, we're very much trying to meet our nutritional needs in the diametrically opposite way that we're designed to. Okay. So in other words, if you're a 6-color PHS, you're trying to be a 3rd color. If you're a 5th, you're trying to be a 2nd. Okay. If you're a 4th, you're trying to be a 1st, and vice versa. Right. And so I see this all the time. And so what it means to be in that transference is that you're not giving your brain what it needs to really differentiate. You're not giving your brain what it needs to differentiate. And it can stabilize, whereas transference on the personality side, this is the conscious aspect of your genetics. By the way, one important thing I'm going to drop here is that the black is not the mind only. The black is the mind, and it is your body. It's the conscious aspect of your genetics. The whole thing is biology, right? But on that black side, in the personality side, that transference never stabilizes. And it's a good thing. It goes back to what I said, a few minutes ago about we need a counterpoint, right? So every now and then I do need to be just looking at things through the lens of hope, right? But not act from there, right? The famous example that Ra gave, because he was personal view, like Teresa actually has very similar rave psychology to Ra, with this desire, motivation, and this personal view. And so he said, with this personal view, if I didn't transfer over to my distraction and just see things through this power, view, which is about hierarchy and what's best and all that kind of stuff, he said, I would just be self-absorbed. I'd be out of touch with the world. I would just be living in this little Ra bubble. So there's benefit to that. So transference never goes away on the personality side. You just watch it more closely and you don't act from there. And on the design side, it does stabilize after some period of time of following strategy and authority and eating according to your PHS.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that because I'm nervous determination. And I went through a period of like orthorexia where I was so obsessed with everything I was putting in my mouth, which would, in my interpretation, be more like the first line. And it's funny because my husband is my transferred determination, and I watch him and I don't say anything because it's just like whatever, but he acts more like I do now that I'm really in my nervous determination. Like he'll walk around while he's eating, he'll eat standing up. He doesn't really pay attention to the type of food that he's putting in his body. And he's always complaining about like stomach aches and those kinds of things. And I'm just like, yep, you have a sensitive digestive system, and that's all I say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's funny because once I started really following strategy and authority, I started caring less and less about the type of food that I was eating. And of course I find myself more drawn to like high quality food. I'm not going to be eating fast food every day. That's just a no for me. But I don't obsess over it. It's not this point of contention within myself where I'm stressed about it. And I'm like, I'm going to die if I don't eat this way. You know, it's kind of just like, oh, my body's a yes to that. I'm not going to overthink it. You know, I'm just going to eat this. And normally I'm walking around while I'm eating or standing up or reading something while I'm eating. And I just notice that I tend to digest my food better when I'm allowing my body to do that.
Yeah, totally. The other weird thing that I've noticed is that, sometimes the transference, there's a period when you're in your PHS experiment for a little while where all of a sudden you start doing things you never did before. Like, for example, my girlfriend Rachel, you know, she's calm eater, you know, fourth color, pointed on to the left. And all of a sudden she started becoming a nervous eater, you know, and even showing signs of the transference even more, you know. So she would, you know, so what does that look like? So the 4 goes to the 1, right? So she's on the quote unquote opposite side or the wrong side of her PHS where she's nervously standing and nibbling. And what is she eating? She's eating single foods, like something like that. And so how I understand this is it's all part of the process and it's all fine, right?
Yeah.
You know, she has to experiment with that in terms of like, you know, if she becomes present to what she's doing, does it feel right to just maybe sit down and get calm or whatever? But what I think is partly happening there is the body's intelligent. And I think sometimes it's throttling the deconditioning, you know, it's just putting on the brakes a little bit because we can't handle it.
Yeah.
And, you know, just the other thing I want to kind of clear up, I literally saw someone, gosh, a year ago, who's kind of big in design, and shame on him, and I'm not going to name names, promising a summer body from following PHS. I mean, what a bunch of...
What? See, this is the sexiness that people try to dress human design up in this sexiness. And this is when I really get into that desire. And I'm like, ah.
It's painful, right? And I hate to see the sacred
is
manipulated like that, but it's going to happen. But the point is, if he was being sarcastic, that would have been awesome. If it was a joke, I mean, that could have been, you know, cool. But he wasn't. He was really selling it in earnest like that. And what I see is that the deepest change with PHS, yes, health stuff can totally go away. My mentor lost migraines that she had for 50 years because she was older when she got into this, right? Yeah. And that's a hell of a thing. However, the bigger thing that it's really helping with is it helps excavate the trauma. It helps excavate the deconditioning. So what I find with PHS is all of a sudden now things are kind of showing up quicker and releasing quicker.
Oh, 100%. My husband's walking by in my kitchen right now, and so I'm going to use him as an example. He is indirect, and he started like radically experimenting with that a month and a half or 2 months ago, and holy shit, excavating.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's almost too intense to live with, and I think it's almost too intense for him. But he'll have a day where he's like, I'm just going to eat today, like during the day. I'm just got like, I want to do it. And I feel like it just kind of pumps the brakes because, I mean, it's a lot of stuff coming out.
Yes.
A lot of stuff.
It makes sense that the body would want to pump the brakes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a huge detox. It's almost like, all right, we're just going to do a couple days of this and then take a break from it.
Yeah.
It goes back to the, you know, what we were talking about in the beginning of our conversation, that you have to trust what's showing up for you. You have to trust your body. And if you get too locked in, it's what I call the difference between instructional human design and embodied human design.
Yes.
You can mind fuck yourself to the point where you are following things that logically make sense. Yep. Like, oh, well, if this is that, then that must be that, and that must mean I need to do that. And you're going further and further on an intellectual trip, and you're not actually listening to what your body is telling you. Mm-hmm. And so you totally got to trust it, you know, and not make things wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Now I'm thinking, like, it's funny because I've been like plunging this past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like even deeper, just within my own experiment, and I've been drawn to, I'm cold thirst.
Mm.
And I've been like, I was at the store and I was really attracted to these hot vinegar chips. And I was like, I just know what spicy does. Like I have physical, it shows up on my face. I get like red spots everywhere.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I need to eat those chips. So I've been like eating them like, so maybe I'm just like, let's slow down the process.
Yeah.
Something spicy. That's funny.
I'd love to know. It's the transference is usually pretty straightforward, except with second and third color. And the reason why is that they transfer to some really subtle stuff, right? Yeah. So second colors taste, just eat what tastes right to you. People that usually stick in pretty narrow margins about what they like. Great to be local food and stuff like that. But when they transfer, they actually go to my PHS, which is, well, low sound, could also be. But that's a subtle world. And I'm curious, for you, it's the light business is what you transfer to. So was it about, I need more sun, or sun is really bad, or how did that show up for you?
So interesting. Jen Zarda and I were actually talking about this in messaging because I love light therapy.
Oh.
I love it. It's like, what is that? And I was like, well, it doesn't make, like, it's not warm to me, it's not. So I think this just like brought that full circle because we were like, she was like, what is it? There's something about the light. And I was like, I don't know. I don't change when I eat, as far as daytime or nighttime or anything like that. But when I start to feel like, so I have light therapy pads and I put them on me to like chill, like it gets me into parasympathetic. And when I'm feeling, my body is feeling like run down or something like that, I do that. Yeah. So I wonder if that's.
Well, the other thing you brought in, which is great, is that it isn't just, it can be food. It can be the types of food we think we need to eat or how we eat that food. It can also be the healing modalities that we think are best for us. Right? And that's very much what you're pointing to.
Yeah.
It's funny. I just saw Carla say that she caught her PHS because this is what I was thinking of. She and I were texting and she was like, what is my PHS transference? And usually it's people that are like, they think they're a sun worshiper when they're athirst. Sun is bad. I never can go out in the sun. And she just said she catches herself reading in the dark. So.
That's very interesting.
And it's so interesting that both of us have husbands with our transferred motivation and determination.
Yeah.
Are we attracted to what's opposite than us or what? I mean, that just shows genetics playing out.
Wow, that's really, now I'm like thinking of all the things and like, yeah, because I'm only drawn to it sometimes, but I mean, I love it. I feel like I love it.
I think, watch it. It might just shift in its own time. Also, say that having your partners have the opposite PHS is a lot less tricky than having a partner that's the opposite motivation. That's tricky business.
I have that.
Oh.
Same.
Double whammy.
That's what I was saying. It's so funny that both of us have a partner with determination and motivation transference.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, my husband being Hope, I'm like, I'm just like waiting, hoping that I'll get out of it.
Well, I noticed my husband's innocence, right? So I noticed I don't do it anymore, but in the earlier days of our relationship, maybe even last year at times, I would try to pull him into desire. I would be like, he'd be like, well, I don't know. I don't need to get involved in that. And I'm like, why don't you care? With the 2020 election, I didn't give a shit about really, the presidential stuff because whatever. But in Arizona, marijuana was on the ballot to be legalized. And I was like, you have to go. I don't care if you vote for president, just vote for legalizing marijuana. It's going to help so many people. I'm like really in that, like, this matters. And I made him.
Side note, Teresa is in Arizona and voted with a Sharpie.
Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, it's just those kind of things. I used to like try to get him riled up, try to get him wanting to take a stance, wanting to take some action, and he'd be in his, you know, in that innocence of like, it's just like not my place to get involved. And
yeah,
you know,
it's super tricky. I realized in hindsight, I had a couple relationships years ago that were that transferred motivation. And I'm like, oh my God, looking back on it, I'm like, oh, we were just pulling each other. You know, I mean, it's so innocent, but you know, I mean, with awareness, anything can work. I think that's important. I always say, as long as there's chemistry there, with awareness, anything can. I mean, people always are like, do these designs work? You know? Involved, you know, with this person. I'm like, if you let that person be who they are, and you have chemistry with them, sure. You know?
Yeah. If you don't try to change, I mean, and we're all in committed relationships. So I think that's probably something that we've seen. I mean, I'll speak for myself, but I've seen an immediate shift with is the flow and the ease in which we communicate and we work together, and all of that is just having that awareness of how different he's wired versus me, you know, and giving him permission to be himself, even though he doesn't know much about design or cares to know. And that's something too. Your partner doesn't have to be like 100% on board for you to just treat them differently.
Totally. No, I mean, Rachel and I are watching this show. It's been on for years, but we just started getting into it, The Affair. And bottom line is, the funny thing is, we're our big takeaway is, oh my God, I'm so glad we treat each other well. Like the people on the show are just so fucked up in so many different ways. And, you know, anyway, we're just like looking at each other. We're like, oh my God, I'm so glad that's not us. I'm so glad, you know, we let each other be, and there's no dishonesty here.
Yeah.
And it's like, even when your partner is struggling and maybe not living their design, quote unquote, I'm still just like, that's a part of his process, and I don't need to get involved with his process unless he asks me to. You know, it's kind of like I don't fuck with him like I used to. I used to be like, you need to go do this, you need to go do that, like why aren't you on my level? Whatever ego trip I was on. But now it's just like, okay, if he ever wants my help, he knows what I'm skilled at this point, and if he ever wants my help or wants me to refer him to somebody, because he also knows I have a lot of people in my life that are qualified in that way, I will. But other than that, like, I'm just letting him be himself, or not be in his not self, and also go through that experience, and that's part of his process, and that's fine.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's cool what you're saying, because, you know, you don't have to be a projector to need to be wait and be invited to share your thoughts, right? It doesn't help one if they're not open to it.
Yeah.
So, by the way, we're getting out to solar plexus binary people there. I saw some touch cognitions and
touch nervous.
That was one of the coolest things. That was one of the talks that James hosted at the conference, was the solar plexus binary. And the feeling that I felt in a room full of 5th and 6th tone was, the only way I can describe it is, it was like being in fluffy clouds together. There was this softness, there was this awareness of frequency. And even somebody, I remember it was towards the end of the talk, but somebody came up and like pulled their chair up, and I don't think they realized what the talk was, and I felt like the tone of the room instantly shift. We were all like aware that there was like an other there or whatever.
A muggle has joined us. Yeah.
Literally, it was just like, and the conversation and how it flowed, and the types and the interactions, and then I remember at one point it was like, James, you looked at Amy and you're like, Amy, do you have anything you'd like to add? Inviting the projector into the conference. And I was like, this is like, let's just stay here all day. Like, this is such a good feeling.
It was nice. I mean, what are the chances that we will ever get, unless we obviously make that happen, but it's just like in the real world, being in a room only with people of that tone, that would never happen. So it was just a very special experience.
The odds that's going to happen again.
Right.
Well, yay.
Hey, Brandy has a space.
I do.
Let's make it happen. Who would come to Iowa for a conference, not just 5th and 6th tone,
but yeah. So if you are newer to human design and you're watching this and you're like, what the hell is 5th and 6th tone? It's feeling and touch cognition. Yeah. And to hear everybody's stories about what they're more in tune with, the weather, like what they pick up on. electricity. I mean, all of it was just like, ooh, these are my people. They understand. They understand how
It's a family. It feels like a soul family type of
Yes.
vibe.
Yeah.
I don't think is overstating it. And if anyone is interested in this talk, just DM me. I might regret saying this.
I think Jonah has it on his YouTube channel. Does he not?
Yeah.
Not that. I don't think he has that one. But
Okay.
maybe he's on it. I don't know. He's put stuff that I'm on up there without me knowing. But if you can't find it, hit me up. I'd be happy to share that talk. I just think that I discovered my cognition late, actually 6.5 years in my experiment.
What?
Yeah, well, my chart was wrong. Basically, what I realized 6.5 years into my experiment, over 2 years of experimenting with PHS, was one day I was like, I'm not a light eater. I'm not a direct light eater. It didn't feel. And I was like, I don't care what's on this piece of paper. This ain't right. I got back to the drawing board. And I sorted it out over a couple months with a friend and a mentor, what my actual determination was and cognition was. We really rectified my chart largely through cognition, which is why I largely rectify charts through cognition and PHS now too. But yeah, it was just this epiphany late in the game. And I realized that your cognition can really change the interpretation of the surface of the chart. Because one of my issues right off the bat was I have gate 57. It's my Pluto on both sides. It's dormant in an open spleen. But I remember feeling like, but I'm intuitive. I'm like, but I know I'm intuitive. And it was like, well, is that just your experience around other people or what is it? And now I understand it's this, no, it's not technically intuition, but it's this sensitivity. It's this being in touch with people remote. It's this transpersonal awareness and this sensitivity to the interpersonal field. Because touch cognition is really connected to the 1949, which is all about that interpersonal sensitivity, right? So all these things started clicking for me really late. Big deal.
Yesterday, I had a really crazy feeling cognition. I was driving home and I was voice noting Teresa, and I listened to hers and I went to voice note her back, and I felt like, put your phone down. And I just was voice noting, so I was eyes on the road, but it was just like this feeling, put your phone down, there's a deer. And I'm like, it's really cold. You usually don't see that many deer like wandering around, but it is a road where there's no lights, no street lights or anything like that. So I put my phone down, both hands on the wheel, all this 15 seconds later, a deer. And then I could slow down, and I was like,
yeah.
I even messaged her. I was like, feeling cognition. I mean, like, it was just like, and listening to that. And so it's given me I feel more empowered to listen to those things, where before I wouldn't, and I'd be like, dang it, I knew that was going to happen, or dang it, and I'd get frustrated.
Well, you're chock full of intuition and instinct because you got the 50-27 going on too.
Yeah.
On all levels.
Yeah. But that was just like, oh. I mean, it's cool when you see that. Or like, one of my superpowers is I can pick up when people are pregnant, like before they know they're pregnant.
Yep.
And I even write a note in my phone of who I think is pregnant and the date. And then like, usually they'll, oh, Teresa just jumped off. I don't know where she went. Do you see Teresa?
I don't see her on my side.
Anyway, she'll come back. But I'll like put a note, and then I'll be like, ha. And my mom is touch cognition, and she's always had those things happen too. So I always thought it was normal. And my sister is feeling. So I lived in a household where all of that was normal. And then I get out into the world and I'm like, not everybody thinks like that or feels that.
Yeah. I see some questions about touch cognition. I mean, Ra famously said that with touch cognition, you could sit on a chair and that the carpenter's wife was pregnant. Now, I have not had that experience, but he's talking about a potential. And he wasn't, Ra's a famous exaggerator, but he was really clear that this is for real. And it's a tactile thing. It's a sensitivity that your skin has all over your body. So touch cognition people often could have a sensitive or touchy stomach. They could be sensitive or touchy people. They're in touch. They're here to touch other people in the fulfillment of their purpose. I really go back to the fact that I think that they're, yes, I'm tribal. Yes, I have the 59.6. But I think the fact that I have touch cognition is what really makes me so attuned to the interpersonal space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, oh, we're out of touch. I feel the disconnect really acutely. My friend Philip Red, he said that he notices touch people, they kind of scan your face. It's this unconscious, just automatic thing. But, you know, when you kind of meet them, they're doing these little micro movements where they're just taking in, you know, all the subtleties in your face. I definitely relate with that.
Yeah. And you don't even realize, like, touch people when they are new and they learn about it, they don't realize that that's how they're taking in so much data. And it's like kind of it's not conscious. You have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, before I really got deeply into human design, I was doing mostly energy work. And when I first had my first session with Brayton, where I was learning about cognition, he was like, yeah, I mean, you're feeling cognition. You can just sit in people's auras and pick up on things, and you're like downloading data from their aura pretty much. And because I'd be like, I don't know how I know the things that I know when I sit with somebody. Like I thought it was channeling at the time, right? I'm like, oh, there's probably something telling me this information. But I'm like, no, it's my aura is actually just picking up on things.
Yeah, totally.
And it cognition enhances the more you're like aligning with your design or going back to your nature. It's what I've realized for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Jen Zarda has a question. Can you touch on the relation? Oh, we're at 11:30. Are you good?
I'm good. Yeah.
Or I mean, 12:30 your time. 10 your time. Can you touch on the relationship between environment tone and determination tone and how they work together?
Yeah. I mean, Jen, it's a great question. I'm still sorting that out. So here's what I see. You know, if you kind of take it literally at face value when you're looking at the chart, it would seem that the environment tone only pertains to the environment. You know, I have a friend who has inner vision here. He gets visions of environments, you know, and obviously it's also about finding an environment that allows him to go into his inner vision. I think for all practical purposes, the two things are pretty tough to sort out. I have second tone there, and I'm a very discerning, taste-oriented person. I mean, Rachel's always telling me this, like, you know, whether it's like with food or with wine or with clothing or whatever, I'm very, very, very particular. Or like of course, also because it is underneath my environment, the atmospheres that I'm in. But I think they're commingled in some way, you know? So I don't have it 100% sorted out. But I would say that it seems like that tone applies to more than just selecting the right environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Teresa and I are the same on both of those.
Yeah, I'm saying like I'm fifth tone on across the board.
Yeah.
Across the board. That's interesting.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, very sensitive. You know, that's something that I've noticed, and I would be like that as a kid too, because as I'm going through this process, I'm finding myself referencing who I was as a child for a lot of it, you know, and just kind of noticing, oh yeah, that was kind of automatic for me as a kid. But being very sensitive, you know, Fran just said something about being very sensitive to frequency in the environment. When I was little, if people were fighting in the environment, I would lose my appetite. It was like instant. And it still happens even because my parents, you know, my dad's an MG, my mom's a projector. They don't get along very well without the awareness of design, you know. And I will just like automatically put my fork down, and I'm just sitting there, and it's like my body's processing them having this exchange more than I can't process the food well.
Yeah,
that's happening. And it's like, I know that I'm nervous determination and I need stimulation, but it's like there's a different frequency to that kind of stimulation, you know, of like anger or bitterness like really coming out. So it's only particular things in my environment I've noticed. Or even like Brandy and I've talked about this, but earbuds, you know, I have the ones that have the strings, but I also have the ones that are Bluetooth. And the more sensitive I'm becoming, if I put those in, it almost feels like it's really hard to describe the feeling of it, but it feels like they're like screaming at me, like the energy of the Bluetooth. And I'm just like, I find myself not reaching for them more and more.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like I don't have that, but through that group that I'm hosting with the solar plexus binary, one thing that's come to surface is just that because we are this family, I can relate to some of that feeling sensitivity as well, even as a touch cognition, whether it's with, I used to think crystals are, this hokey thing, but I have to admit that, when I'm around crystals, I can feel
I'm all over.
I don't
everywhere.
But I definitely, it's for real. And I was kind of surprised. I'm like, I thought this was just this placebo effect, but so it's good for feeling people and touch people to talk, because they can really trade notes and kind of open each other up. Like for example, I love homeopathy. That's an energy medicine. I mean, that would be perfect for feeling people, but it also works really well with me.
Yeah. I've always been drawn to energy medicine and crystals. Again, I always thought it was hokey. I was like, there's no way. But then I kept finding myself being drawn to them. And if I didn't buy them for myself, people were giving me them as gifts. So it was one of those things where I'm like, clearly these are meant to be around me. I'll never forget when we got married. We are really good friends with, their family, but when you just have like a special bond with some people in your family, his aunt and uncle, and they know our taste. They know us really well. I thought they were going to give us this, they built up to us this incredible gift that they were sending us, wait in the mail. We're so excited for you to get it. You guys are going to love this. This is amazing. And this is way before I was into a spiritual path, really. It showed up on our doorstep and it ends up being this giant crystal, this huge crystal. And I remember feeling so deflated, really? A crystal? You built that up? And now I'm obsessed with it. It's this big and it's next to our bed. And it was really my first crystal. And so I just laugh about it now because it's almost like the universe being like, you need this one. You need this giant one next to your bed.
Yeah, I don't even know what they do. I know what they do. Or I just get them because I like them. I don't grab one because it has that property. I'm just this feels really good to be around. This one feels really good. I don't know. What does it make you feel like? I'm good. I don't know.
They feel like they have heartbeats to me. I hold one and it feels like this whoa. And I'll be like, don't you feel that? And people are like, no. But I handed one to my husband one time and he's feeling cognition. And I was like, and he's like, yeah, I can feel that. So I don't know, maybe it's just a sensitivity thing.
Yeah, totally. I see Fran there.
Yeah, Fran has a question. I'd love to know some of the questions James asks when rectifying charts.
Yeah, I can touch on a few examples. Obviously, basically rectify a chart, you have to know a chart really well. And you might have to travel anywhere into the substructure or on the surface to rectify the chart. But where I start with, I initially send over maybe 15 questions or so. And I start with the assumption that they're in PHS transference. I've never had that assumption be wrong. And so, it's sort of what we touched on earlier. I kind of look at the opposite side there. In my case, fifth color, low sound. So it's if you're upper trigram at all, I'm like, have you thought food, you need to worry about food to bring about your health? Have you been obsessed with certain diets? In my case, it's very much like having a limited diet, eating the same things every day. So I ask questions about that to figure out whether, the birth time is right from a PHS standpoint. Cognition-wise, again, using myself as an example, touch cognition, you just have to find that right question, right? And so for me, one of the most telling things, and it's a weird thing, was that when I was growing up, I only wanted to wear comfortable clothes until I was a teenager. And then, really from conditioning, did I start dressing differently. But I just loved being in comfortable clothes. And I was so resistant. As a really young kid, everything my parents bought for me, I hated, stiff jeans. And they used to put seams on the end of the socks. I don't think they even do that anymore. But anyway, that kind of sensitivity is a real big tell with touch cognition. So you're trying to find those things. Or Rachel's a smell person, and actually just came up last night. She said, yeah, one of the reasons why I'm with you is I like your smell.
That's amazing.
Product, something, and the way that it smells. But, it's the funniest thing. So I've talked to smell cognition people, and 9 times out of 10, they've either been with someone or broken up with someone because of their smell. It's at least a component. It might not be the thing, but if you say, hey, has that ever been an issue for you? Like you thought you were into someone, then you were repulsed when you kind of leaned in and got close, and smell people will tell you that that's a thing.
Yeah. So a good question just popped up to kind of go along with this. Dave, Neutrino Radio, is asking, does cognition go in transference? Oh, he's gone. But the question just disappeared. But does cognition go into transference?
It does not. Tone does not transfer. Color, lines do not transfer either. Lines have that harmonic or resonant relationship. Like Teresa is harmonic with me. She's 2'4", I'm a 5'1". These profiles really vibe well. That's not a transference thing. Transference is about color alone.
Yeah, you guys also have 659. We all have bits of each other's charts. We're like, hey.
Well, I think that's why we were so drawn to you at the conference. Like we kept just going to your talks, and there were talks that we really wanted to go to, like mentally, right? Like, oh my God, I want to go to Amy Lee's talk or whatever. And then your talk with you at the same time, we're like, we're going there.
Yeah.
No, I felt the same way. I immediately felt a connection with you guys. So
yeah. All right. Anything else that wasn't covered? I'm just going to look at these questions real quick. Nope, I think that's it. Is there anything that you would like to add before we hop off? Oh, I'm going to do a little plug here. So James will be tagged in the caption of this video. Go check out his page. Amazing posts, aesthetically pleasing logo. I messaged him one day. I was like, that's fucking brilliant. But you can see all of his offerings in there, and he really looks at design differently. Oh, here we go. Do you want to talk about, real quick, give a rundown of your education?
Oh, sure. Where do I start? So I have done a mix of things. I did immersions with Marianne Winiger, and she actually trained me to be a Living Your Design guide years ago. I took PTL 1 with Alok, really a master keynoter, but I finished my analyst education with the Austrian School, where I was taught by Martin Grassinger, Susan McMurray, and Ilse Sendler. I've also did a year-long experimental course with Darmen and Leela, which was really an experiment around observing the 4 transformations. So it's your PHS, or your determination, environment, motivation, and view. What else? And I've spent, gosh, I don't even know how many, maybe 100 hours of one-on-one deep coaching with my mentor, Kamud Kabir, and that has been invaluable for me. One thing I will say, I think there is it's always by design and by your authority, but I think some people underestimate what the value and the relevance of the coaching model in design. They think that you can get this just by PDFs and listening to raw audios. Well, some may be able to do that, but for me, it was invaluable to really witness how Ra's, first generation students work with the information and how they transmit it. And it's really so much about the transmission. And so no matter how smart someone seems, it's really about the transmission. Mm-hmm. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. And working on it with a mentor or a coach like that, you can really have that support to integrate, which I love.
Yeah. And I feel like it depends on your design, and that was something that I realized 2 years in was I need support. I need coaching. I need mentorship.
For fourth lines, we need to externalize.
I want the class setting.
Yeah.
And, and I just keep getting things to respond to, and I keep being a yes to it so far. It's like, I love the process of going through the education, and that's not for everybody, but I do think there's kind of a wall that you hit sometimes when you don't decide to get education in some way, shape, or form. You know, it doesn't need to be the way that we've gone. But
I think so too. I think my observation, and again, you know, I think everyone's got their own path, but I think generally speaking, I think people that didn't work with anyone can get kind of stuck in their own misconceptions for a while, you know, for maybe too long.
yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure
today.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Everybody go check out James's page. Check out his offerings. Not self-reading. Amazing. He's awesome. Here I'm projecting onto a fifth line.
When James first came onto Instagram, Brandy and I were like, oh my God, we're so excited. And we're just being the biggest cheerleaders. And he's like, yeah, I hope you don't burn me at the stake.
Like,
We'll see what happens with Instagram. I'm still feeling it out.
Yeah, it's, I mean, it's the wild, wild west, right? You've been used to Facebook land, which I'm like, I don't even go into Facebook territory. I cannot. So I feel like if you've been able to handle Facebook land, you can do Instagram, but who knows? Guess we'll see.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, James. We'll talk to you soon.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.